trying to do a better way of recording, and going to try and elaborate more on the different reasonings you should have of the capabilities that you're going to need to use to defend yourself. Just like basically trying to examine all the ways you should be performing techniques so that you understand why it's being done in that way. So they show this as a pattern to attack your opponent and a way to transition even hypothetically to the other side and stuff, and just being aware of your movements basically. And so the basic fundamental double stick thing they teach you, or that you can look up to find, is you strike with this hand and this weapon, stick or whatever, and then you switch and strike with this stick, and then you strike again, you switch and strike again, and then you can either step or you could step forward and attack. So you could step back and attack, or you could step forward and attack, or you don't have to step at all. You can drag the weapon across and stay cross-stepped to the position you started with, and even retracting this weapon, my right hand weapon, I have to be cognizant of why I'm doing that and how I'm doing that, because I might be put into this position and retracting the weapon might not be what I should be doing, facing it the opposite away from my opponent, because I might have to then go immediately back to being able to stab him and changing my position in another direction. So something like that scenario, when you're changing strikes and you're moving into a different position, you have to be aware of why you change that position. So just in the circumstance of this again, so I mentioned that if I direct my weapon away from my opponent, it could be a lost advantage. The reason being, I'm currently in this position and my opponent could have some advantage over me. I might need to go back, step away from my opponent, and then if I needed to enter in again, I could strike like this. You just have to you have to know what your available options of how you're striking and what it presents to your opponent, and how you need to respond in the various ways correctly. So with this being the way they tell you to be able to perform double stick, that is part of learning, in the process of learning the technique. You then have to realize this attack right here, this opening attack, is limitly viable, because technically when if I'm making this attack, and we'll also say that my weapon is already drawn, it's not a sheathed weapon, or I'm just able to be in this position. This is not technically ideal. In some circumstances it could be, and it could not always get you in trouble in some hypothetical sense. But going like this, you notice my arm is closer to my opponent, and I have no way of defending my arm yet in the process. So I'm just presenting my opponent a way to affect me more easily. I'm being disadvantageous to myself. So that's not necessarily what you'd want to do. And why I was also talking about, you're not always slashing with this way of performing a martial art, basically. You also need to be capable, like, this is actually probably somewhat more defensive of the stance you should take. But again, doing this presents what the length of your weapon is, presents that you're in a position to do a different way of attacking, so it's not always the correct thing. I don't have to do this either. I could leave my position like this, and instead of using this arm to attack, I could like square my body up to my opponent, which is not always good either because you're presenting vital organs to your opponent. But it does allow you to then, I could swipe like this if again this was already drawn, and even so you can, some weapons can be of the right length to draw fast enough to then swipe cut like that. So these are all the factors of what you need to consider of understanding techniques you should do. So again, this is not always viable because you're presenting your arm, although in some ways, like I could do the same twisting motion and just swipe, deflect. If they had if they had their object pointed like this and they lunge struck at my gut and I had my weapon drawn, I could deflect and cut with the secondary weapon at them. That it could be one way of interpreting what's happening. So you just gotta take all of the things possible into consideration, but regardless of taking everything into consideration, you also have to start somewhere and build from that starting position of knowledge. So, like I said, this is the fundamental process of knowing how to strike in one various patterned way, but you can't lock yourself into thinking this is the right and only way to defend yourself. This is basically like a kata in a sense of performing certain types of strikes in a certain way that are not completely adverse in your benefit. So to broaden your perspective of that, I've mentioned like you could stab and slash, but you might not want to present your weapon, so you might want to rotate. You could strike like this, you could strike like this, and then come and strike from underneath and retract to be in the opposite position. You might also, like I was talking about confined space, you do want to be able to move around and move around in ways that are more beneficial, like instead of, which is I was mentioning cross-stepping. So like for this circumstance, I want to have a better, more aggressive deflection of a gut attack for some reason, just emphasizing in that manner. I might want to step and deflect and then cut down towards their face. So I'm positioned like this. I deflect and cut to where I can then cut like that and stab, like a variety of, you have to be able to move in a variety of different ways. Same principle, I could move like that to then stab like that. You have to, and you also need to know how to be at greater distances to your opponent, and maybe this is a beneficial swing you can make to, and I cross-step into my opponent. It's not always about cross-stepping, but that's just one way of doing it. You could lunge to attack, to then attack again to switch, and attack out of your position and move back and forth from your opponent. Those are a variety of things you might have to come to terms to be able to do. Well, you should be functionally able to do. And then mentioning being able to move, you also need to be able to stay in your position. It could mean not changing your footwork, and it could also still mean changing your footwork in a designated area of which you're confined to. So like in the position of the attack, so technically, I mean, again, you wouldn't want to necessarily make this your opening strike in most circumstances. Like I was saying, I might want to rock to this side, and while I'm doing that simultaneously, I could be swiping like this to then face the weapon like towards my opponent in that direction and gut stab them out like that or something. There could be a variety of ways you'd approach it like that. You also don't necessarily, and like I was saying, roll and swipe like this, and also to roll and swipe like that to then go this direction. You need to understand which direction you attacked in one way opens you to be able to attack in another way, as well as giving yourself, putting yourself in a more beneficial spot of your defense as well. A fight is offense and defense simultaneously in most of the circumstances, and it's not just literal armor as defense and literal weapons as you can use these weapons defensively too, not offensively in either circumstance. So I don't know, you have to take so much into consideration and know just the different variables you're actually going to be coming up against. So again, but say I am going to do the basic technique and I'm just trying to understand being having my feet locked into position. So somehow, for whatever reason, I'm able to successfully make this attack. I'm able to kind of drag it across my opponent and retract it. And I'm able to make another attack, like so. I might not want to retract it, as I was mentioning in the beginning of the video. I might want to be able to stab my opponent again and stay remaining the way I was. Or I might want to retract the weapon, and then as I'm retracting this weapon, I come back to cut, or I just load up again, see what my opponent is doing. Could also rotate the weapon this way to be able to stab my opponent and cut, and then move or not move. So just some examples would be like, well, I don't know. I got to just do it sometimes too and not talk about it and just focus my own training. But I also want to have a way of discussing, understanding what I'm thinking out loud, and hopefully, gain some benefit in that way too. But so, I mean, like I could attack here, and now retracting the weapon could be what I do. I could go here, and then there, or here, then there, here, then there, or something like this, and be ready to then go there. It's not perfect, and forcing yourself into limitations is also not necessarily what you want to do either to the fullest extent. You want to understand if you were put into forced limitations, but what you'd also want to do is you don't necessarily always want to keep your feet permanently stationary if you can avoid that. You don't want to put yourself into specific limitations just because sometimes you have to be. You should also try to break free from that and provide yourself with a way of overcoming your opponent putting you in that limitation, or the circumstances of what you are that limit you. So instead of keeping my feet permanently stationary, which is not necessarily what you want to do, like I said, you also want to be able to, like, say I make this attack and I'm making this attack next. I could even do that simultaneously, by the way. You could go like that. You could, as you're rocking your body, and then have a difficult time, but there's so much to explain. But so here, I'm making this attack next. As I'm making that attack, I'm going to switch my feet where I'm at. I'm just going to, and now I'm in the opposite footing stance in the same vicinity I was. I'm still keeping my opponent at bay with the weapon forward that I attacked with, and now I can go into a stabbing motion and go to something else. So, or when I made that transition, I was like this, I could retract, and as I'm retracting this weapon, my opponent sees that's an opening to come in to attack me, but I have this like it is, to where I can then, and again, to just demonstrate moving in the same position, I could cut and strike. I didn't connect the tree, but I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just a representation of something physical that you see of an approximate distance. But I could switch my stance like that, and then I'm here presenting my weapon again, facing my opponent, keeping them at bay defensively, and then offensively I could go for another stab, something like that. So you have to go step by step and practice, you know, general techniques of how, and then evolve those techniques and just, you know, try to make sense of what the evolution should be and why it even is factually necessary to be doing a certain movement. But yeah, I'm having fun doing it myself, and I'm just having fun explaining it, basically, and just trying to have some additional ways of enjoying, you know, hitting a tree with 2 sticks, and the reasoning behind that even in the first place. But yeah, so there's a lot to consider, and for whatever reason you could be in an opposite stance, just some additional stuff, and you gotta understand, you know, even if you're in the not general, your non-dominant stance, you have to know, okay, again, I'm facing this way, so attacking with my hand like this is not ideal, so I have to rotate my body like this or like this, and then technically if I do it like that, I have to, you know, or I could just stab, I could use the same hand forward, and then, so the offbeat pattern could be I use the same hand twice and then the opposite hand, instead of using opposite hands every time. I could swipe like this, stab like that, cut like that, instead of going one hand, 2 hand, back to the same hand and stuff. So you have to also vary your striking in a way that benefits you offensively when you're needing to make progression against your opponent. So there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration, like I've already mentioned several times now. And I would even say, like, do be able to use your feet too. So like I strike, and I don't know, I might want to strike this way and then kick them and then stab or something, you know, maybe to try to trip them, or just having a secondary use of they're not presenting a weapon yet or something, you know, being able to kick, keep them at distance. That might not be the right kick even. I might just low kick their shin, but I mean, if you're good, you know, kick them in the jaw or something, but don't limit yourself to just using your hands and sticks. And of course, your first level of defense more than likely is going to just be your fists, or also possibly your legs in some sense. But even maybe you're this close and a headbutt is a pretty effective strike. I mean, there's a variety of things you got to consider. Now, of course, we'll go beyond that. These are just drumsticks. They're easy to put in my pocket, and I could technically be, you know, having some options for extra defense if needed. Say somebody does try to mug me with a knife, and I don't necessarily, I mean, I could pull off my belt to have some defense. It takes a little while, and your legs are a better ranged weapon, but you still could get cut in some sense. But I'm just holding a pair of drumsticks and somebody's trying to mug me. I mean, the easiest option is, you know, back away if you can. But like, they're just an object that is not excessively surmountable and is viably usable. And if you're questioned about why, you know, you have something like this, you know, it's just an ordinary object in some sense, it is probably strange. So there's a variety of reasons and why you carry certain weapons at all. Like a pocket knife could be used for opening mail, survival tools and stuff like that. And yeah, I'm in the woods with drumsticks. It doesn't make 100% sense legitimately in this circumstance. But I'm just saying, like, walking around, well, I could be practicing drum patterns or something, trying to entertain myself, but then they're also technically a defensive way, an item that I can use defensively to give myself some extra form of defense besides just my fists and my leg, or yeah, my fists and my feet. So just things to consider. And I've shown in my other videos how I carry real weaponry on me. So just to go to that depth, let me check the time. I don't have any way of knowing exactly how long this is. I don't have much more time. I'm not going to spend an exorbitant amount describing everything, but so hypothetically I carry one of my weapons, the one I would like to have two of, so that I could do more intense training, but it can sit in my pocket on me by a leather belt in this manner. So technically I can kind of open my jacket and pull it out like this, have it unsheathed, and I technically would have a weapon facing like this. I can also kind of reach my hand in there a little bit awkwardly. My wrist faced a different direction, and I could pull it out like this and I could step out, pull it out like this, and have some form of attack stance in that position. The other thing, I don't know if I think I have mentioned a couple times, is you can put a sword on your back. If it's the right size, you can draw it out from off of your back and also be able to sheath it back. And one way I like to, but the thing is about doing that is you are going to have a handle that is shown to an onlooker. So what I do to prevent that is I take my hood, and it's on my back under a jacket, and I have a hoodie hiding the handle, and that does take a little more time to, remove your hood to get access to draw it. So you have to take that into consideration while that is the way of concealing it in a sense. But yeah, so you have to know all these ways that are limitations and how to prevent them and get around them and so on and so forth. But like I said, those things can be hidden. Something like these could be hidden if they were real weapons, like so. And I've mentioned how I could get access to them. And then once you know that that's possible, you have to understand, okay, I can technically be in this position, I can draw it, so now I'm like this. Maybe I only got the hood off of the handle and I'm ready to draw this one, and I was able to get this one out. And so yeah, I could be like this or something. I would need to direct. You just have to understand where you're starting from, and then how you can access what you need to access to grant you more significant benefit over your adversary. Yeah, I think that's about as much as I can. Really shouldn't share all of those details technically, but again, it's not really why I don't really care about that in the fullest sense. I haven't done anything. I'm literally just practicing ways of understanding how to defend myself appropriately, trying to maybe help others understand the same if they want to. So yeah, all right, lot of information there. Have fun dissecting it, I guess.